Mr. Wells, E6, George Street Parkade, and then we have a few other OCPs to go through, first and second reading. Over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the December 7th, 2020 Council meeting, Council directed administration to return a further report regarding the George Street Parkade capital project timelines, reports to Council and Standing Committee on Finance and Audit, budget increases, changes to the delegation authority regarding budget amendments, city labor costs, details related to the steel tariffs, and the water and sewer upgrades. This report provides Council with the additional information. Steel tariffs. Factors affecting the cost increase in the George Parkade involve U.S. tariffs, an extremely busy and volatile construction market with a shortage of skilled labor, and an increase in construction costs that amounted to an overrun of approximately $2.4 million. Table 1, Your Worship, provides a further breakdown of these costs. The municipal infrastructure costs. Improvements to the municipal infrastructure were required to facilitate the construction of the multi-family housing and parkade, provide capacity for future development and redevelopment projects in the downtown, and address issues associated with aging infrastructure such as maximum capacity, poor condition, and a high risk of failure. City worked with local contractors to provide the following municipal infrastructure improvements. Sanitary sewer main. The sanitary sewer main relocation project included the installation of approximately 1,100 meters of new sanitary main along 7th Avenue, Patricia Boulevard, and Lower Patricia Boulevard. This project rerouted an existing sanitary sewer main and provided capacity increases necessary for the future development in the southern portion of the downtown, an area that includes the Park House condominiums, Hyatt Hotel, student housing, the new pool, and other properties that are active at this time in the development proposal process. Without this upgrade to the sanitary sewer main, there was no capacity for these projects. The water main replacement. The replacement of the old water main on 7th Avenue adjacent to City Hall. The water main had been rated as an extremely high risk for failure due to its age. Since 6th Avenue and 7th Avenue were going to be excavated for the sanitary sewer realignment, it was prudent to replace the 64-year-old water main within these areas at the time. Storm sewer main. Again, Your Worship, because of 6th and 7th Avenue being excavated for the sanitary sewer realignment, it was prudent to replace the 57-year-old storm sewer within these areas at the time. The other city works involved. A district energy system was extended from George Street to the George Street Parkade. The excavation resulting from the utilities work in 7th Avenue intersection to George Street allowed for the revitalization of the section of 7th Avenue in front of City Hall. This revitalization included the widening of the sidewalk on 7th Avenue, an additional sidewalk also abutting City Hall, the addition of street trees, the installation of 4 new planters, new decorative street lighting, narrowing of 7th Avenue between Dominion and George intersection to provide street calming, enhancing and enlarging the area around the cenotaph, the installation of bollards along the south side of 7th Avenue, and a new pathway and lighting between City Hall and Patricia Boulevard. City labor costs and total municipal infrastructure costs. The city labor costs in relation to the replacement and relocation of utilities was approximately $260,000, with the majority of work being done through contracted service. City labor costs in the George Street Parkade were $50,684, and this amount is included in the George Street Parkade cost. The overall cost related to the replacement and relocation of utilities, off-site works, and district energy connection was $11,705,050. Attached in the report, Your Worship, are project timelines, staff report dates on the George Street Parkade. Table 2 and 3 provide a breakdown of the George Street Parkade and utilities budget and timing of the budget amendments. Administration is here to answer any questions regarding the report, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Go to Councillor Frizzell, followed by Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you, Mayor Hall, and through to Mr. Wells, thank you for the report and for giving us all the details behind the changes. Just wanted to ask you to give some thought. If we were to have had in place the changes that we made in November on discretionary funding for the city manager, if those had been in place throughout this term, would there have been changes and impacts to how this rolled out following the timeline that you put before us?
Your Worship, there would have been an additional process based on those changes. We would have come back with reports to seek Council's approval to spend more than the 5% allocated on the project up to a maximum of $100,000. So that process would have been different, Your Worship.
Okay.
Councillor Frizzell, you good?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Hall.
Councillor Ramsey, followed by Councillor Sampson.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have a couple questions. The first is about inconsistencies with information that came first in the December 7th report and now in today's report. So in the December 7th report, it stated that in July of 2018, the developer provided the city with an updated cost estimate for the Parkade based on the new design and the developer's tendered prices to build the Parkade. The developer advised that the new estimated price was $20 million. That was in July of 2018, and it further stated that administration confirmed with the developer that the city wished to proceed with the Parkade. And today's report says in September of 2019, the developer provided further price updates for the George Street Parkade based on tender prices for mechanical, electrical, fire suppression, and membrane roofing, and the new estimated cost to complete the George Street Parkade was $22.5 million. So are both of those things true? Is one of those things true? It's just...
Your Worship, both of those. One was in 2018. They hadn't tendered those additional items at that time. They had a budget in place, and that was additional. So when it came in September 2019, that was the additional $2 million approximately.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. So in the report, it lists several water, sewer, and storm relocations in addition to the DRES extension. So I'm just hoping you can clarify. Council approved the $4.5 million for the utilities relocation project. Was that a budget amendment on top of an existing budget, or was that the total, supposed to be the total budget for that utilities relocation?
Your Worship, that was a budget amendment process. The other portion of that money was funded within the existing budget.
Okay, so the $11.7 million, that is not over budget.
Your Worship, there was budget amendments to that through delegated authority, but Council had delegated, I believe, I'm just getting the number for you, or had approved a total budget of $10.649 million for that.
Okay. I just, you know, this is my first term on council, and going through the materials, it does read that, you know, council approved a $12.6 million, Parkade and $4.5 million in a budget amendment to the utilities relocation. So it looks like we approved something for $17.1 million and it's coming in at $34.1, but that's not true, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. So I have already sent an email request to Mayor Hall, but I would like to formalize my request with a motion in that I would like council to receive a delegated authority use report that shows the total use for all of 2020, and then moving forward have that report come quarterly to council so we can see how the delegated authority is being used moving forward. This is within my comfort level. We've just modified it. I am curious if there are other things that are going to come out of the woodwork on the previous city manager's delegated authority and what that looks like. I want a heads up. So that's why I'm asking for it for 2020, but I also want to make sure that the delegated authority is doing what we want it to do moving forward. So I'd like to formalize that as a motion, and hopefully someone will second it.
Yep. Seconder? Councillor Sampson seconds.
Thank you.
So I'll move to the recommendation that's on the floor. Any comments to the recommendation that I have Councillor Sampson, Councillor Skaken, Councillor McConaughey in the queue? Any comment on the recommendation? If not, I'll call the question and then go back to the queue. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation put forward by Councillor Ramsey? Those in favor on Zoom?
In favor.
Thank you. Those opposed? That carries unanimously. So now I'll go back to you, Councillor Ramsey, if you had more.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. I don't have more. I look forward to my council colleagues' comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Sampson, followed by Councillor Skaken.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have a few comments. I might end up jumping back in later, but I think this is the intent of this is supposed to be an explanation of how we ended up where we ended up, which was significantly over budget on this project. I guess to a degree, I get this, the steel tariffs being a cause. I don't think I'm happy about that, but I think that does seem like a reasonably out of our control thing. So I understand that. Some of the other costs associated under Table 1, I feel like we're going to need to continue to do better at our estimating. We talked about that, how we're going to change the way we go at planning our projects, and I think some of these things are going to change moving forward. So I think this was an unfortunate result of the way we were doing things at the time of day when this was planned. What does kind of concern me is it does seem like there was a significant lack of planning when it came to things like our infrastructure that already existed that was going to need attention, like the sewer upgrades, the water main upgrades, and other infrastructure upgrades that took place. It seems like we completely forgot that a lot of this was done, installed, put in place 60 years ago, and would need attention at some point, and that adding a couple hundred residents in an area would definitely push our infrastructure to the limit, and that it was just a complete oversight. So that's really unfortunate to me, and really just frankly not acceptable in my opinion. That can't happen again going forward. Some timeline clarification. So on the I think it's page. I'm not 100% sure what page that is, but yeah, that page there that's on the screen. The project was approved to go forward in 2018, from my understanding, but not until 2019, March 11th, the third point down, did council actually approve it to be on the financial plan. Why was that, and what happened there? Because to me, that would be a necessary step in moving forward on the project, but the project actually began construction prior to then. Just an explanation on what happened there.
I'll ask Mr. Dalio to answer that question, please.
So that was a process step that needed to be cleaned up. It was pointed out in our 2018 year-end processes. So you're right, in 2017 was basically when we first started talking about the project. It was first approved. There was an agreement that was entered into with A&T. That was all approved at council. And we approved everything in principle, but the one piece we missed was a specific resolution saying that this budget needed to be funded in the financial plan by this funding source. And so while everything had been approved, it was just that one process step. So that was cleaning that up for our auditors in the 2018 year-end process.
Okay, great. So at that point, it was procedural. It had to be done. We already began construction. We already entered the contracts. It had to be done at that point.
Correct.
Great. And the budget at that time was for the $12,600,000 when that was approved.
Right. It was to establish that original budget. Yeah.
Great, and I believe Councillor Ramsey, I don't have the report in front of me, but Councillor Ramsey referred to, I think it was July 2018 that the developer let the city manager know that we were already over that budget. So that would have been an appropriate time in theory to update council. I guess maybe that's a fair question to put on you, Mr. Dalio, but that would have been in my opinion, that would have been a great time to let council know that we were significantly over that budget, upwards of $8 million more than what we were approving at the time. Despite it being procedural, still would have been a great time. So that's not a question, because I don't think it's fair to put it on anybody who's in this room, because it wasn't those in this room that did that. But I mean, we saw our city manager of the day approve overages that were drastically over the scope of the project, and drastically, sure, within the realm of what was allowed at the time, unfortunately. But I mean, that's extremely disappointing. There was a perfect opportunity almost a year after finding out that it was going to be $8 million more than what was originally planned, to let council know, and it wasn't told to council for about another year and a half later. And that's just completely disgusting. It's unacceptable. So I'm really disappointed to see this timeline and really understand what took place, and I think the intentional withholding of information to council it's just really messed up, and we can't go back, as I said last time we discussed this. And so trying to look forward and see the positives, where it sounds like we're going to take a lot of steps to do better moving forward and not let these things happen again. We've already changed the delegated authority levels. We're going to change the way we plan our projects and move forward. But I think it would be wrong of council not to completely acknowledge and really be disappointed in the fact that we had something like this go by us that was an intentional deceit on council. So anyways, that's all I have, Your Worship. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Sampson. Councillor Skaken, followed by Councillor McConaughey and Councillor Everett.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I got a couple of questions here. Administration agreed to a $20 million, I guess, contract with a developer in July of 2018, according to the previous report we had. Is that correct?
Your Worship, it was a design build contract, so that based on that information, that was the number they provided us and asked us if we wanted to proceed.
Okay, so you decided to proceed, I guess, administration, correct? And this was before it came to council. Is that correct, Your Worship?
Correct on the 20 million?
Yeah.
Yep.
Administration confirmed that they would want it to proceed, Your Worship.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the question again, Your Worship. I just need clarification. Did the administration go ahead and commit to the $20 million parkade before they got the okay from council in any fashion?
Mr. Wells, Mr.
Yes or
Dalio?
no? I don't want to beat around the bush, Your Worship. I'd like a yes or no. If that means an explanation, I'll get it.
Your Worship, there was confirmation that we wanted to go ahead with the project. We didn't know that it would come in at 20 million because they indicated there was other items to tender, as they gave us an update in 2019 to say it was going to be 22 million, Your Worship.
Okay, so I guess the question is again, did the city commit to this build contract before council gave administration to do so? Yes or no?
Your Worship, we committed to go ahead with the project based on a $20 million cost.
That's not answering the question, Your Worship, to Mr. Wells. Was this commitment made to the developer before council was in on it or voted on anything regarding this? Yes or no?
Yes, Your Worship.
Yes, what, Your Worship?
There was
council involved at all, or did we know at all that you had committed to the 20 million in the summer of July 2018?
Your Worship, council was not aware of that we had an updated price and that we'd committed to go ahead with the project.
Okay. So when was council, just going through the timeline, when was council first made aware of the cost of the parkade And when did we vote on the original 12 point something million dollars, which we thought was the original cost of the parkade?
Your worship, the first time that council approved the 12.6 million was on March 11th, 2019.
So after the fact, administration came to council, your worship, as I understand, knowing that they already committed $20 million or more to a parkade, and then came to council and said, we need $12.5 million because that's all it's going to cost, correct? Someone better answer that question, your worship, because I am upset.
I guess the update to council in November, and I'm just looking here, was 16 plus. That came from FNA, or to FNA.
Yeah, but not to council to vote on, right?
Right.
My concern is, your worship, we had changed no delegation of authority for administration to do this, and no delegation of authority bylaw anywhere in this country would have given administration a $20 million blank check to say, go ahead and build a parkade without council knowing about that cost. And then later on, we changed the delegation of authority bylaw, almost in my opinion, to backtrack and cover the extra $7.5 million, which we never okayed. You know, your worship, did this happen under some different leadership? You bet it did. But none of this would have come out. And administration mentioned that in December. If I wouldn't have asked for this report, and I think that's absolutely appalling, it would have come in as a line item under the budget. No questions, no nothing. Second question, your worship, if we didn't have to reload, what's the total cost of this parkade project, including the cost to relocate the infrastructure because we had to put the parkade there? Not because we wanted to update any aging infrastructure. What is the total cost as a result of building this parkade?
One second, your worship, we're just getting to that information.
Okay, and well, Mr. Wells looks at that, your worship. I go back to the previous report where we talk about, I wanted a breakdown about the extra 2.9 million cost, and administration laid it out quite well. But the reasoning was UF tariffs were extremely, UF tariffs were high and an extremely busy and volatile construction market with a shortage of skilled labor and an increased construction cost amount to 2.9 million. But in the 2.9 million, it says crane work, concrete steel, mechanical costs. It doesn't say anything about the increased labor costs or shortage of labor, and I can't see the tariffs.
Your worship,
So I wonder why two questions, your worship. Why wasn't the 3 million originally? That should have been in the original cost, and that had nothing to do with tariffs or shortage of labor.
Yeah, Mr. Wells has got some information.
So, your worship,
Okay.
I can answer that. So the factors affecting were the steel tariffs, but as I indicated at the last report, it was also the extremely busy and volatile construction market with the shortage. So these were the categories where they saw the increases in the budget for the 2.9, your worship. So the tariffs are built into under steel and concrete, but there's the construction cost drivers and those other elements in that 2.9, your worship. So that's what that's trying to address, your worship. So your worship.
So, yeah.
So overall, as Councillor Skaken was asking, the overall expenditure on the parkade and the utilities was $34,163,487,000. Your worship, a lot of that utilities work, though, the rerouting of the sanitary was not this project. In all honesty, it was based on that we didn't.
It doesn't say anything about the increased labor costs or shortage of labor, and I can't see the tariffs.
Your worship,
So I'm wondering why two questions, your worship. Why wasn't the 3 million originally? That should have been in the original cost, and that had nothing to do with tariffs or shortage of labor.
Yeah, Mr. Wells has got some information.
So, Your Worship, I can
Okay.
answer that. So the factors affecting were the steel tariffs, but as I indicated at the last report, it was also the extremely busy and volatile construction market with the shortage. So these were the categories where they saw the increases in the budget for the 2.9, Your Worship. So the tariffs are built into under steel and concrete, but there's the construction cost drivers and those other elements in that 2.9, Your Worship. So that's what that's trying to address, Your Worship. So, Your Worship.
So, yeah.
So overall, as Councillor Skaken was asking, the overall expenditure on the Parkade and the utilities was $34,163,487,000. Your Worship, a lot of that utilities work, though, the rerouting of the sanitary was not this project, in all honesty. It was based on that we did not have capacity. Our gravity sewer did not actually, it was a pump. It didn't flush out until we drained the pool every year. We didn't realize this till we actually started the engineering work. So that was needed. Those other projects could not have occurred. So we don't have an individual breakdown to the cost directed to this project for that, but it was a definite shortfall as the engineers provided me that information for this report, that we were short capacity and the water line and storm line were completely in bad shape. When we looked at the previous picture, some of them were wood or asbestos pipe and things like that that was just not sufficient. So it would have failed in the future. We would have to redig the street again and redo it. So it was an opportunity to do that.
If we did not dig the hole for that parkade, we would not have taken up with that $8 or $9 million in relocation costs. Correct?
No, Your Worship, but we would have faced that cost when we were doing the new pool. The sanitary sewer wouldn't have worked for the new pool. So it was part of, right? That's my understanding.
Okay, it cost $600,000 to connect the parkade to the energy system. The budget was the budget was 90,000. It come in at 590,000, so $500,000. So it's safe to say the parkade come in at over $30 million, correct?
Your Worship,
Including the relocation of the services.
I'm not totally sure that would be the number, but if that's what council's comfortable with, then we could say that, but I'm not sure what that actual cost would be.
Well, Your Worship, you know, and I know that we've made some administrative changes, but the community, when they look at that, when I look at this, I can't remain silent and say, good report. Because, you know, it doesn't cover everything that I wanted, even though it breaks down the city cost, labor cost, $260,000. I knew there was extra costs. And I think administration should have been above board in the very beginning and let us know what they did, because they didn't have the authority, Your Worship, to okay with the developer $20 million when we didn't know it. And I just have to ask one question with regards to how these contracts go, Your Worship. So the developer says, we need $20 million to build a building or a parkade. What kind of proof do they furnish to administration so administration is comfortable saying, yes, it's worth $20 million, we're going to give you $20 million?
Your Worship, they provided us detailed cost sheets for all their estimated costs with their contract bid prices, all on spreadsheets that were available for us to review.
Okay, so that's good to know. So you guys had spreadsheets, detailed breakdown and cost. So when you guys came to us 3/4 of a year later, you had definitive amounts of money that was going to cost. Yet council voted for $12.5 million for the so-called cost for this parkade when administration knew it was going to be over 20, Your Worship. And that's appalling. And, you know, the people in this community are outraged, and I'm outraged. And the more I look into this project, it just stinks, in my opinion. And going forward, I mean, my God, this is, anyways, Your Worship, I've said enough. The public's going to have a good look at this. The media is going to have a good look at this. But there's no way anybody had the authority to spend that money without council's approval. And that is the legal process we go through for these projects, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skaken. Councillor McConaughey, followed by Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. I think Councillor Skaken has pretty much covered everything that I thought would be important to cover. When I read this report, I thought it certainly ballooned with a lot of extra information from the core question, which was the parkade itself. I understand the entire housing development, but there just seemed to be a lot more information in here. From my perspective, it's we were originally quoted 12.6 from the developer. Then staff was aware that it went over 20 to 22. Council was asked to approve 16, even though staff knew it was going to be over 22. That's where my problem lies, 100%. We can't just roll over this and just say, well, let's do better in the future. This is a real travesty. This is really not good. It's egregious. I have a question. Well, first a comment. So with regards to the developer, I see this less of an overrun of the project as a fault of the developer than I do as the developer, as the scope of the work changing, the developer doing their duty to let the city know what the cost was going to be, and then the city going ahead and approving that cost without council knowledge. So I think we need to put the package right at the doorstep where it belongs. I have a question. With regards to the increase in delegated authority, that was not long after this. I don't expect to get it a 100% answer here, but was that meant to cover up the costs, the increased costs, so that this would never come to light if it wasn't for Councillor Skaken actually bringing this up and asking for this information, and it would have become a line item as we were told a few meetings ago. It just seems it smells bad that this overrun came up, and then all of a sudden, hey, let's just increase the delegated authority of the city manager and we can just carry on down the street. And so that is one question. And then who all knew about this on staff or anybody on council?
I think I can probably answer the first question, Councillor McConaughey. The intent of the initial change of delegated authority, to remind everybody, before it was any capital project could be amended up to $1 million, and that could be done with as many projects as the city manager wanted to in any fiscal year. So the intent of the change to go to the 5% was to actually put a cap on everything. So if we do over 100 capital projects, which we do, and if the city manager had the ability to amend each project by $1 million, you could see how that total dollar figure could quite get out of hand. The intent of changing to the cap of 5% was to actually put a cap on it. And so, but in doing so, we did away with the per project basis, and I could understand how someone could see that this was done with that intent, but that it really wasn't. But you're right, it allowed the ability to all be used for one project instead of this $1 million per project.
Thank you for that honest answer, Mr. Dalio, because that is certainly what it looks like. And then my next question is, who all knew about this who all knew about this, that the cost was not even at the same time as council was being approached for 16 something, that it was actually 22.5?
Your worship, the senior team knew that number, and we allocated projects accordingly to try and work through that process through budget.
And
Thank
then,
you, Mr. Walls, for your honesty.
Councillor McConaughey, I'd say from the F&A committee, and I'm just looking for the date here, it came to F&A in
November 17th.
November, it was 16 plus.
Correct.
So that's the increase that I knew.
We knew before that it, right.
That F&A knew about. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I don't know how to wrap this up. I don't know. I'll hear what else my colleagues have to say. And I look forward to your comments as well, Mayor Hall.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Everett, followed by Councillor Sampson.
Okay, Your Worship, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about this, because it's like a bad onion. As you unpeel each layer, it continually gets a stronger odor to it. And I appreciate Councillor Skaken asking the question so that we can get all of this information on the table. It's important that we do that so that we don't continually go back and try and dig a little deeper and see if there's any more worms to come around this. And by bringing it forward tonight, whether you like the report or don't like the report, you can't like the report because it exposes a process problem that we've had for quite some time. And then you get to where you second guess whether the information that you're getting is true or not true, as Councillor McConaughey indicated. And again, when we got the information, it was in November of 2019. We were told prior to that, when we made the changes to the delegated authority, that it would lessen the amount that the city manager would be able to utilize, as Mr. Dalio just reiterated for us. And we have made, Councillor Ramsey has put forward changes from the Finance and Audit Committee so that we can revisit issues and get current information, so we're not in a position like we are tonight where we're dealing with something that happened back in 18 and we're 17 and we're trying to deal with it in 2020. It's a state of affairs that we're in. Nobody likes it, but you can't unring that damn bell either. You can only say, from here going forward, this is what we have to do as a council. This is what we have to do as senior administration team so that we do a job that represents what our folks want us to do in the community. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Sampson, followed by Councillor Kroos.
Thanks, Your Worship. So I understand the entire senior team knew about the project increase budget to 20 million back in summer 2018, but who makes the decision to either move forward on that project or not? Is it a city manager or is it a group decision? What does that look like? I mean, the delegated authority is technically one employee's, so that would be under, it's not a vote, I imagine. It's a individual authorization. Is that correct, Your Worship? Correct. So I just want to clear that timeline up a little bit more. So if in summer of 2018, the city manager of the day knew about the $20 million price tag, but didn't actually have the delegated authority that I think came through Finance and Audit by the recommendation of that city manager in May of 2019. Is that correct? So the approval to actually increase something by that much wasn't even in place until May of 2019. And it came from a recommendation of that city manager through F&A then to council. What does that mean? That city manager didn't have the authority to approve the $20 million. So that puts us in a really odd spot. That authority to approve that type of price tag wasn't there. So I guess I just want to roll through this in a hypothetical way. If council never changed the delegated authority in May of 2019 and that price tag was approved of $20 million prior to that, if it came to council and said, hey, we got to change, do you want to proceed? It's going to be $20 million now. And council said no. A year and a half later, we were in trouble. There was no choice. Is that correct? There was no choice. We've already proceeded too far into that project at that point. Council didn't have a note.
That's a fairly accurate sum up. The report probably would have came after the fact and asked for approval after the fact.
So we would have been, I think, in a really awkward spot had council not approved that delegated authority, which was pitched to us. I actually went back and watched the meeting last week from May of 2019 when it was pitched to us. It was pitched in a way from our city manager of the day that it was going to be, as you described, Mr. Dalio, which I don't want to doubt. I believe that was your intent when you pitched it. But that city manager intentionally told us that this was going to provide greater oversight, and in turn gave her the opportunity, or the city manager of the day, the opportunity to to finally officially approve what she had already approved a year and a half earlier. So I guess, I mean, that in itself, there's a million things about this that are unbelievable and frustrating and complete crap. But that in itself is the part that absolutely proves to me that that council was intentionally deceived by one member of staff, and that's unacceptable. So with that, I guess I want to find out more information, but I think it would be best done in a closed meeting. So I'd like to actually refer this to come back in a closed meeting. Thank you, because I think we have a further conversation here that might actually involve a legal opinion. So that blows my mind. So I'll wait for the vote to see if it comes back, but I think we have a further conversation here. That is intentionally deceitful. So thanks, Your Worship.
We have a recommendation on the floor. Councillor Kraus, did you want to speak to that? Okay, I'll go to anybody wanting to speak on the recommendation that's been moved and seconded by Councillor Ramsey. Seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation in the room, all those in favor on Zoom?
Aye.
Those opposed? That's carried unanimously. And now I'll go to Councillor Kraus.
Well, I'm glad that council now has the complete picture. I'll just repeat that. I'm glad that council now has the complete picture. It's all been said, and I have nothing to add. I like the onion analogy. It's now important how we move forward. So I look forward to seeing how we proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Skaken.
Well, thank you, Worship. Just clarifying, what was the motion, Councillor Ramsey's, to have the reporting structure back quarterly? Because you just said we voted on Councillor Ramsey's motion. I thought it was Councillor Sampson's
Sorry,
motion.
I meant Councillor Sampson's motion, second by Councillor Ramsey.
Your Worship, to bring this report back to close so we can seek further legal opinion. That was the motion.
Right.
Okay, and I just want to make sure, Your Worship, that the community knows when we go into issues like this that might involve legal matters, that we have to go into closed. But this is not going to get buried and closed, I assure you. And I'm sure administration and yourself, would agree with that statement. Is that correct, Your Worship? It's not going into some closed graveyard where we never hear about it again.
No, and we have
we
have the ability around close to, and I'll look to Ms. Conley and to clarify this, to move things to open, Councillor Skaken.
Yeah. I just want people to, and you're right, Your Worship, I want people to be assured that just because this issue is going to go to close because it might be a legal matter, does not mean that it'll be the end of any type of public discussion or reporting on this. That's all.
So let me go back to your previous question about, did you want clarification about Councillor Ramsey's recommendation?
No, I got that. I just wanted to make sure we knew that it was Councillor Sampson's motion that we were voting on.
Thanks for the correction. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Worship.
Councillor Frizzell.
Daylight is way past due. You know, the governance and the operations need to be working together, not against each other. And to discover that the trust that you had and worked with was misplaced is infuriating. And it makes me question where we need to go back in other places now. I'm glad we're going back to closed for the implications that it could have, and I agree with Councillor Skaken that closed isn't the place where it ends. Thank you, Mayor Hall.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't have anybody else in the queue. We have a recommendation at E6 to receive. Sorry? Councillor Scott?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I concur with Councillor Frizzell that trust is a very precious item, and when it has been fractured, we need to do some work collectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Everett?
No,
you're good.
I just wanted you to recommend. Yep.
Okay, Councillor Everett moves the recommendation for receipt. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Sampson. All those in favor of receipt in the room? All those in favor of receipt on Zoom?
Aye.
In favor.
Thank you. Those opposed, that's carried unanimously.